The screen tore through the marble lobby so suddenly that every conversation stopped at once. "Dad!" Little Lucy Bidwell stood near the elevator doors, shaking uncontrollably. Her face was soaked with tears. Her backpack had fallen onto the floor beside her. Jackson Bidwell dropped his mop instantly. The cleaning bucket crashed sideways. Dirty water spread across the polished marble, while office workers turned in shock. Because the quiet janitor everyone ignored suddenly looked like a man seconds away from losing control. Julian Wells smiled at first. He thought Jackson would stay silent like always. But then Lucy cried again. This time louder. This time terrified. And something dark changed in Jackson's eyes. Before we go deeper into this case, take a second and hit the subscribe button, give this video a like, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. Because what happened next inside that building would leave the entire company shaken. Jackson Bidwell lived in a tiny apartment on the edge of the city with his 8-year-old daughter Lucy. The wallpaper peeled near the windows. The heater barely worked. And every month felt like another fight to survive. Still, Jackson tried hard to make the place feel warm for Lucy. Every morning before school, he made her breakfast no matter how tired he was. Sometimes it was pancakes. Sometimes just toast with peanut butter. Lucy never complained. She always smiled anyway. Jackson worked nights as a janitor inside one of the biggest office buildings downtown. Most people there never looked directly at him. To them, he was invisible. Just another man pushing a cleaning cart through empty hallways after dark. But every paycheck carried the weight of rent, groceries, school supplies, bus fare, and overdue bills. Jackson's wife had passed away 3 years earlier after a sudden illness. Since then, life had become one long stretch of exhaustion. He barely slept. Barely rested. But every night before work, Lucy hugged him tightly and whispered the same thing. "Be safe, Dad." Those words stayed with him through every shift. Mrs. Maya Corrigan, an older neighbor from across the hall, helped watch Lucy whenever Jackson worked late. She treated Lucy like family. One evening while Jackson tied his boots near the apartment door, Mrs. Corrigan looked at him carefully. "You can't keep carrying everything alone," she said softly. Jackson forced a tired smile. "Parents don't really get a choice." Mrs. Corrigan sighed sadly because she knew he was right. At work, Jackson answered to Lola Moran. She managed the building staff with strict rules and little patience. "Faster tonight," she often reminded him. "Important clients are visiting." Jackson never argued. He simply nodded and kept cleaning. Then there was Julian Wells, head of building security. Tall, arrogant, and always searching for someone weaker to embarrass. Julian loved mocking Jackson. Sometimes it was small comments. Other times it was worse. One night Jackson arrived 8 minutes late after Lucy became sick at school. Julian stood waiting near the entrance. "Well, look who finally decided to show up," he said loudly. Several employees nearby laughed quietly. Jackson lowered his eyes. "My daughter was sick." Julian smirked. "That sounds like your problem." Jackson stayed silent because he needed the job. That silence slowly became part of him. Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts below. Have you ever seen someone treated unfairly simply because of their job? Because Jackson was about to discover just how cruel people could become when they believed someone was powerless. A week later, Lucy came home from school unusually quiet. Jackson noticed immediately. "What happened?" Lucy hesitated before answering. "A boy said you clean toilets for rich people." Jackson felt his chest tighten. Lucy stared at the floor. "They laughed at me." Jackson knelt beside her carefully. "There is nothing shameful about honest work." Lucy nodded. But her eyes still looked hurt. That night, Jackson headed to work carrying that pain with him. The building was hosting a major investor event. Expensive decorations filled the lobby. Music echoed through the ballroom upstairs. Lola Moran rushed between workers giving orders. "Nothing can go wrong tonight," she warned. "Mr. Lucas Small himself is attending." Jackson cleaned nonstop for hours. Then suddenly a waiter slipped near the ballroom entrance. A tray filled with drinks crashed across the white marble floor. Guests gasped loudly. Jackson hurried over with towels and supplies. But before he could even speak, Julian pointed directly at him. "This happened because the janitor left the floor wet." Jackson froze. "That's not true." Julian stepped closer. "You calling me a liar?" People turned toward them immediately. The room became painfully quiet. Jackson felt dozens of eyes judging him at once. Lola looked nervous. The investors looked irritated. And Julian enjoyed every second of it. "You embarrassed this company," Julian continued loudly. "You're lucky you still have a job." Jackson's face burned with humiliation. Then his phone buzzed. "Mrs. Corrigan." Jackson answered quickly. Her voice sounded panicked. "Lucy ran out of the apartment after seeing something online." Fear rushed through him instantly. "What do you mean?" "She saw a video." Minutes later, Lucy burst through the lobby doors crying. Mrs. Corrigan hurried behind her breathlessly. Lucy held up a shaking phone. Someone had uploaded footage from the ballroom. The caption read, "Careless janitor ruins elite company event." Thousands of views were already spreading online. People mocked Jackson in the comments. Some called him stupid. Others called him poor trash. Lucy cried harder. "They're being mean to you, Dad." Jackson felt something break inside him. Employees nearby looked uncomfortable now. But Julian only crossed his arms. "Maybe next time he'll learn how to do his job." Jackson slowly stood. For the first time, anger showed openly across his face. And Julian suddenly realized the quiet janitor might finally be reaching his limit. "Before we go deeper, I want to hear your thoughts. If you were watching your child cry because strangers humiliated you online, how would you handle that pain?" Because things were about to become even worse for Jackson and Lucy. The next morning, Jackson barely touched his breakfast. Neither did Lucy. The video kept spreading across social media. Even strangers recognized him on the bus ride downtown. One man laughed while passing him. "Careful with that mop, buddy." Jackson kept walking. But humiliation followed him everywhere now. At school, Lucy faced whispers from other children. At work, Jackson faced cold stares and quiet laughter. Someone even taped screenshots from the viral video inside the janitor closet. Julian stood nearby smiling when Jackson found them. "Looks like you're famous now," he joked. Several workers laughed softly. Jackson ripped the paper down slowly. His hands trembled with anger. But he still said nothing. That silence made Julian bolder. Later that night, Emma Bedford approached Jackson near the elevators. She was one of the younger office employees. Unlike most people in the building, she always treated him kindly. "I saw the security footage," she whispered nervously. Jackson looked up sharply. "What footage?" Emma glanced around carefully. "The waiter slipped before you even got there." Jackson's heartbeat quickened. "Then why did nobody say anything?" Emma lowered her voice. "Because Julian controls the security reports." Jackson stared at her silently. Emma continued carefully. "He wanted someone blamed before Mr. Small arrived." Jackson clenched his jaw. "And I was the easiest target." Emma nodded sadly. "There's something else." Jackson waited. "I heard Julian complaining about Lucy coming here sometimes after school." Jackson frowned. "He said she made the building look unprofessional." Those words hit Jackson harder than the public humiliation. Lucy was not a problem. She was the reason he kept surviving. That night, Jackson returned home emotionally drained. But something felt wrong immediately. The apartment door was slightly open. His heart stopped. "Lucy?" No answer. Jackson rushed inside. Her backpack lay on the couch. The apartment was empty. Mrs. Corrigan appeared behind him trembling. "She disappeared 10 minutes ago." Fear exploded inside Jackson instantly. He searched the hallway screaming her name. Neighbors opened doors. Children pointed toward the street. Then Jackson's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered immediately. A calm voice spoke. If you want your daughter safe, stop asking questions about Julian Wells. The line disconnected. Jackson stood frozen. His entire body shook with rage and terror. Nothing mattered now except Lucy. He sprinted outside into the cold rain. Cars splashed water across the sidewalk while he searched desperately through the streets. Lucy! His voice cracked. Then finally he saw her near a dark bus stop bench. Curled into herself. Crying alone. Jackson ran to her instantly. Oh my God! Lucy grabbed him tightly. A man followed me, she sobbed. He said you needed to stay quiet. Jackson looked around furiously. But the street was empty. Only rain. Only darkness. Only fear. Back at the apartment, Lucy refused to let go of him. Jackson sat beside her all night while she slept against his chest. For the first time in years, he felt truly helpless. Not because of money. Not because of exhaustion. But because someone had dragged his daughter into their cruelty. The next evening, Jackson walked into work with dark circles beneath his eyes. Julian noticed immediately. You look stressed, he mocked. Jackson stared at him silently. Something about that silence unsettled Julian this time. Then Emma appeared again carrying a small flash drive. Her hands trembled. I copied the real security footage, she whispered. Jackson stared at the drive carefully. You could lose your job. Emma nodded. I know. Jackson looked around the empty hallway. Why help me? Emma's eyes filled with emotion. Because Lucy deserves better than this. Jackson felt his throat tighten. For weeks, the world had treated him like he did not matter. But finally someone saw him as a human being again. Before we continue, tell me honestly. How far would you go to protect your child if fear and humiliation followed your family everywhere? Because Jackson was finally done staying silent. That same night, Lola Moran called Jackson into her office. He expected another warning. Another insult. Instead, she quietly closed the door behind him. I watched the footage Emma copied, she admitted softly. Jackson remained silent. Lola looked ashamed. You were telling the truth. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Lola sighed heavily. I should have defended you earlier. Jackson looked down at the flash drive in his hands. People like Julian count on silence, he said quietly. Lola nodded. And I let that happen. Hours later, Mr. Lucas Small arrived for another executive meeting. The atmosphere inside the conference room felt tense immediately. Julian stood confidently near the large screen. He still believed he controlled the story. Then Lola pressed play. The real footage appeared clearly. The waiter slipped alone. Jackson rushed over afterward trying to help. Then Julian falsely blamed him in front of everyone. Every lie. Every humiliation. Every setup. Captured perfectly on camera. The room went completely silent. Mr. Small slowly turned toward Julian. You framed him? Julian stammered nervously. It's being misunderstood. No, Emma Bedford said firmly from the doorway. You misunderstood kindness for weakness. Jackson stood quietly beside the wall. But for the first time, nobody looked through him anymore. Then Officer Dean Zane entered with 2 officers behind him. We also received reports involving threats made toward a child, he announced calmly. Julian's face lost all color instantly. Lucy's frightened voice echoed inside Jackson's memory. And suddenly the harmless janitor everyone ignored no longer looked weak at all. Julian Wells was escorted out of the building before sunrise. Employees watched silently from the lobby as officers placed him into a police car. Some workers looked shocked. Others looked relieved. Officer Dean Zane later confirmed that Julian had helped spread the online video and arranged for someone to scare Lucy into silence. The truth moved quickly through the company. This time, nobody laughed at Jackson anymore. People apologized instead. Lola Moran gathered the staff together 2 days later. In front of everyone, she faced Jackson directly. I failed you, she admitted. I saw warning signs and ignored them. Jackson nodded quietly. The pain could not disappear overnight. But honesty still mattered. Emma Bedford became Lucy's hero after that. During one visit to the office, Lucy hugged her tightly. You saved my dad. Emma smiled through tears. No, sweetheart. Your dad saved himself. Then came the moment Jackson never expected. Mr. Lucas Small invited him upstairs privately. The office alone looked larger than Jackson's apartment. Mr. Small handed him a folder. Inside was a new position managing maintenance operations for multiple company properties. Better pay. Health insurance. Normal hours. Jackson stared at the papers speechless. You earned this, Mr. Small said firmly. But more importantly, your daughter deserves stability. Jackson's eyes filled with tears. That evening, he and Lucy walked home beneath the city lights together. No fear. No shame. Just peace. Lucy looked up at him, smiling softly. You don't look tired tonight, Dad. Jackson smiled back. For the first time in years, she was right. Some people carry enormous pain quietly. They wake up exhausted. They keep smiling anyway. They keep working anyway. And most of the world never notices the battles they fight alone. Jackson Bidwell was one of those people. He cleaned floors while carrying grief inside his chest. He swallowed humiliation just to provide for his daughter. And like so many single parents, he kept sacrificing pieces of himself simply to survive. But this story was never about weakness. It was about love. A father's love for his child. The kind of love that stays gentle until someone threatens the person who means everything to him. Before we finish, I want to ask you something. What part of Jackson and Lucy's journey hit you the hardest? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you are a single parent carrying heavy burdens nobody sees, this story is for you too. If this story touched your heart, take a second to like this video. Subscribe to the Redeemed Single Dad for more emotional stories about struggle, hope, resilience, and second chances. And tell us where you're watching from. Thank you for being part of this journey. Because sometimes the quietest people are fighting the hardest battles of all.